What's going on, guys? My name is Jake,
My name's Jesus.
and this is your Body Comp Prescription, where we help you navigate through all things health and fitness. Hope you're all having a great day, and if you haven't already, be sure to follow us on Instagram at bodycomprx. Jesus, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today's episode kind of came from inspiration from this IG post I saw from these physical therapists, and they were talking about stretching. Their
Okay.
claim was, is stretching good for you? Is it bad for you? Is it bad for your gains? They were talking about static versus dynamic stretching. So I know we've kind of like briefly mentioned this in one of our previous episodes. I believe Jake made a comment on it, but we never actually explained why we said what we said back then. And if you weren't listening, go check that out. But today we're really dive deep into what it is. I think prior to understanding, like, I guess the science behind, like anatomy and exercise, my personal background was running. In high school, when we would run, maybe we would warm up for like a mile, and then we would meet up as a team and then do, some static stretching, right? Where we would bend over, touch our toes, maybe do a little calf stretching, bring your ankle up to your butt and stretch out your quads kind of deal. And that's kind of like all I knew. That was my background, right? I wasn't really aware of, what I was doing. I was just kind of listening to the coach's perspective. And I don't know if you feel this, what your background is, but I think even in basketball, if I remember, we would literally get out of the locker room, get ready for practice, and we would go straight to the ground, sit down, and then basically do some static stretching.
Yeah.
So if this is you out there and you're listening and we're thinking that we're like shaming you for only doing static stretching, don't feel guilty. I think a lot of people do this, without actually understanding what the difference is and if it's beneficial or if it's actually hurting your gains. So I think we'll jump into it. Jake, in your own words, I think we should explain the difference between dynamic versus static stretching. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, static in my mind is where you're physically like still, you're holding a position to lengthen a muscle. I think that's pretty straightforward for static stretching. When I think of dynamic stretching, I think of movement, going through ranges of motion, but is a little bit more going through shortening and lengthening of a muscle, both in hopes to warm up to prepare for something, probably.
Yeah. I think, I just want to throw out there, like, example of this, if you didn't know, static stretching is literally what Jake said. You're kind of stretching your muscles to its furthest point, holding that position for like 15 to 20 seconds. And it's usually like one specific muscle group, right? It's not usually like your whole entire muscle or your entire body. Dynamic stretching, on the other hand, it's usually, it's a movement of the joints and like your muscles going through like a full range of motion. A lot of people, an example with this would be like some like body weight exercise. Maybe you're doing, I don't know, maybe you're doing some like body weight squats or like, some like little burpees or like lunges with just your body weight, right? Kind of to get the juices flowing, your blood flowing. But Jake, in your opinion, how important is stretching? Whether you do it before a sport, running or lifting. And I want to say, don't get into the specifics on why it's important, but I'm just asking you, how is it important? And I want to throw this out there because in college, we had a professor, right? He was teaching us exercise physiology, and he also taught me functional anatomy. I don't know if you remember this, Jake. He says he loves running, but he said he never has stretched in his life before. He said he hates stretching. He never stretches. So to him, stretching is not important. But to you, what do you have to say?
I do think stretching is a little bit overrated, to be honest. I think like I could probably be doing more of it, but I'm definitely on the side of it being a little bit more overrated than underrated, just because I feel like, again, there's all those questions of when should I do it, what should I be doing, and all that kind of stuff. And I think for common knowledge, I think not putting as much of an emphasis on stretching around your workout is not that big of a deal. But again, since you told me to kind of like save the why and specifics, we'll probably get into that in a little bit.
Yeah. I want to say I'm kind of like in between both. I think stretching is kind of overrated, but I think mobility is a little bit more important. And I think mobility is what we'll touch right now in a bit. Mobility is more like dynamic stretching, right? You're really working on your mobility across multiple joints and multiple muscle groups. That is beneficial. So I guess the next question is, um, why is it important, and can it ruin your gains or muscle mass? I think in this situation we're talking about, maybe those listening, maybe myself, I want to gain muscle, and I'm in this journey, in this process of wanting to build muscle. If I'm only doing stretching, is it going to ruin my gains?
Yes, actually. The there are tons of studies that show that doing, especially static stretching before any kind of resistance training, weight training, actually decreases your strength. And for those of you that don't know what that looks like, is if I'm doing chest, right? If I'm about to bench press, right, and then I do a doorway stretch to open up my pec, and stuff like that. I'm actually lengthening my fibers and stretching them out. And when I go to, let's say, 1 rep max, I might not be able to lift as much. And also, I'm making my joints a little bit looser, which in that case is not good, because when I'm handling all that weight, I need my joints to be prepared for that. And having them loosened can almost be counterintuitive. So I do think that stretching can be very harmful in certain instances, which is why I generally stay away from it, because my primary goal is to build muscle and, preserve strength, build strength, all that kind of stuff. But was there a second part to that question? Sorry.
No, I was just that's exactly how you answered it. If it was bad for you, and kind of explaining why that was. I think this is a perfect case of something that's specific, that too much isn't always better,
Yeah.
right? Too much stretching isn't always better. And I think another example is, if you're squatting that day, and like how Jake said, you're trying to hit your 1 rep max, and you're going to be squatting a lot. If you were to do some, static stretching out your quads, maybe your hamstrings, your body kind of already knows a squat, right? You don't really have to teach your body that movement. Your body naturally knows squat depth and going back up. But if you're stretching, and then you go on to put up whatever your 1 rep max is, and you squat, because your joints and your muscles are much looser, you might naturally just go a little bit more deeper into your squat than you prefer. And that, kind of how Jake says, that leads to injury, right?
Yeah.
Possible injury. It's not always guaranteed injury, but it's possible that you kind of injure yourself, or setting yourself a failure. You may not even be able to go back up because you're reaching a new territory that you're not used to. In fact, there's some research out there that suggests, and we'll link this in the bottom, that static stretching for about 30 seconds neither improves or reduces muscular performance, right? So they had these individuals go out there. One group did static stretching, the other one did more of a dynamic stretch. And the group that did static stretching, their muscular performance, they were testing their quad and hamstring performance, I believe, and there was no improvement from that. But on the other group who did dynamic stretching, did see an improvement. And that kind of leads us into our last final question of, so if we're saying static stretching is bad for our gains, how should we be warming up? How should we be stretching? What do you do?
So I think that's a really good question, because I think when people think of stretching, they think of warming up, right? Like they feel like they have to do something before they train or exercise, right? And in certain cases, I would agree. But what I want to do before I answer the question is that when you are doing anything resistance based, right, the best way to warm up, right, because we're using warm up and stretch kind of interchangeably in this case, because a lot of people think they're the same thing, is you should just be going through the movements that you are going to be doing primarily, right? So if you're doing squats, that's why you progress your way up to working sets, right? So that's why you don't necessarily have to do a 90-90 stretch to open up your hips before you go heavy squat, right? That's probably actually bad for you. But what you should do is warm up with the bar, warm up with 10 pounds, 25 pounds, whatever your progression looks like. You work your way up to it so your body can acclimate and prepare for the load. But you shouldn't have to static stretch, because again, it could weaken yourself. But as to how I implement stretching into my training, into my daily routine, I only do static stretching post workout. Like, it's
Hmm.
not even a regular thing. It's only when I notice severe soreness, and when I think my muscles need to go through greater range of motion. Um, and yeah, but when I do dynamic stretching, I do it right before um, any lifts. I mean, it's not, again, a ton. It's more of like, depending on what movement's happening, I'll do like some arm circles, I'll do some leg swings, just very simple stuff to help kind of like make sure that they're not tight, but I'm not over stretching them either, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I think that's a really good example. I like, like I said, I usually start off with body weight, or like if it's something that I can't really do body weight, like maybe it's the bench, I start off really low and I, get my body used to the movements. Like I said earlier, your body knows these movements already. You don't have to teach your body these movements. But what you do for your central nervous system is kind of get it like in that mindset, like, okay, I'm about to do a bench press, I'm about to do a squat. You got to get it, get the blood flowing again. I think, if that doesn't like suffice for you and you want to do something more, maybe like a brisk walk, because I think at least for myself, I train in the morning. So of course I go from like, 7+ hours of just, laying in bed, sleeping, my body still. So of course my muscles aren't, as loose as I would like them to do. But maybe instead of, doing some static stretching, maybe you could go on the treadmill for like 5 minutes or less, nothing to get you tired, but enough to just get the blood flowing through your body, get you acclimated, and then you could go ahead and start lifting, right? This is what I wanted to bring up. It was kind of a very easy topic, but I think it's something that many people had in mind, wondering like, oh, why do people say stretching's bad for you or stretching's good for you? And I think we want to clear this up. I think to summarize it, I think warming up should be kind of going through the movements and not necessarily stretching should be saved for maybe, like Jake says, after your workout. But yeah, that's all I have to say. It wraps about today's episode about stretching, whether it's beneficial or not, difference between static and dynamic. We hope we answered some of your questions, and if you didn't, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let us know what we missed, or if there's any more follow-up questions you'd like for us to clarify. But with that being said, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for listening, and until next time, peace.
Peace.